Welcome to the Print Design Podcast, the show where we talk about all things print and packaging. We go behind the scenes with designers and talk about the print projects they designed that really rock their world. From file prep to holding the finished product in their hand and all the key decisions in between. So, let's talk ink on paper.
Jason, my brother, so great to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing terrific. We were just chatting a little bit before we started recording. We're both adjusting to new isolation life currently.
That's right. Yeah, we're both in our flu shelters while we do this.
I love that, our flu shelters. Awesome. So a lot of people know who you are and know the great work that you got going on, but let's, just for the people who haven't discovered you yet, tell the listeners about yourself.
So I am a graphic designer, illustrator, artist from Augusta, Georgia, originally from the Midwest. I've been designing nonstop for 23 years now, I think it's been.
Or 20. Haven't left that chair.
Yeah. No, I've been in the same chair. Actually, this chair I have had for a while, but no, I've been doing it since 1997. So I've been at it for a while. I've been good at it for not that long, but I keep trying to get better.
For about 5 or 6 months, I've been pretty good at it.
Yeah, 5 or 6 months. Well, I've been faking my way through it. Recently, middle of last year, I became fully independent. So that means I don't have a boss or coworkers. It's just me, which it was never my goal to do that, but it's just that's where I have landed right now. I was working for myself, which I've had a great time doing. Mm-hmm. And I've got some great clients that really, we have a mutual respect for each other and it works out really well.
That's awesome. I want to linger there just for a minute here.
Okay.
So you made that move pretty recently. What are some of the unexpected things that you found by making that move?
The biggest one, well, there's two, and they're probably equal. One of them is the amount of support that I would actually get. I had no idea. I kind of thought that the people I worked with were kind of maxed out, and I didn't really see that they would give me more work if I was just doing this full time, but that wasn't true. So the people that I was already had a good relationship with really loaded me down with a lot of work as soon as they found out that I was committed. And so that was something that was just, it wasn't surprising because they're great clients, but it was unexpected. The other is the amount of work I can get done through email and phone calls. I thought that I'd be having to leave here meeting people all the time, and that I'd spend at least a day or two a week just in meetings and going out and talking to people and doing presentations and things. But really, a lot of the people out here they're busy too, and they don't really want to see you any more than you want to see them. And so a lot of them, an email or a phone call, that's all they want, because it's universal that nobody likes meetings. And so
yeah,
that's surprising to me too.
And that works out perfect, because once we're all released from isolation, nobody's going to want to see anybody anyways.
That's right. We'll go right back to our previous social distancing.
Awesome. So with this being the Print Design Podcast, man, I really want to dive into this print stuff. Yeah. I want to talk print. I want to learn print. I want to hear some stories from you. And I want to start with way back in the day, little Jason. Mm-hmm. Tell me your earliest memory of print or packaging, maybe something from your childhood or teens.
So the thing that kind of always I was fascinated with were the covers of VHS tapes at the video store.
Oh, yeah.
So growing up in the Midwest, I mean, I remember whenever we rented the VCR from the gas station that had the tapes, and so I just remember getting to walk through there and seeing all the different stuff. And most of it was like the horror movie section, and a lot of it was like Disney stuff too, but there was just so much to look at.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I wasn't even really interested in the movie itself, but just the covers of those were incredible, and I almost had the whole store memorized. And that was a really interesting way for me to be exposed to some different things that I'm just wasn't going to see anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I distinctly remember those like Blockbuster days where I would, you spend an hour inside Blockbuster walking around the aisles, and oh man, the new releases, there's 30 copies, but they're all gone, and you're moving down, and then eventually you end up in like the dollar rental section where you've got like all the old school movies.
And I mean, if you think about it, like this would have been in the mid '80s and even into the early '90s when all this was popular, and a lot of the covers of those VHS tapes were hand painted. They were basically the poster that you saw at the theater on the cover, and it wasn't like today where it's just Nicolas Cage's face on a black background.
Although I imagine that would sell a lot.
I'm sure it would, but there was actual art on those things.
Yeah. So true, man. I remember those. Great one. Now, what about recently, Jason? If you have any recent interactions with print or packaging that you really enjoyed or stuck with you or you found memorable?
So I've been doing some beer packaging lately, and I it seems to be kind of beer and coffee seem to be the holy grails for designers. And so I've been able to work with a beer client here locally that is switching from bottles to cans, and I had originally done the bottle designs. And it was when they were starting out, and so they were very safe. It was a kind of please accept us into the market type layout.
Yeah.
And they've switched to cans. So I've done some heavy illustrative type stuff for the cans, and just to try to compete on the shelf. And it's been very, very cool because getting those things approved and just knowing the details of what goes into packaging. Packaging is not a simple thing because it's so technical that you have to get all this stuff just right. And so just learning that stuff on those cans and just the different sizes and what you name the beer, and that you've got to had the place of origin and the address of the brewery. And there's just so much stuff that goes into that other than just making a pretty picture. So it's cool to do that.
So are you talking then you're producing printed cans for them, or are you producing like shrink sleeves for cans?
They're going to be like they actually print the can. Yeah, so it's kind of cool.
Metal cans.
Right, it's full printed, and that adds an extra layer of coolness because you have a layer of white on those, and anything that you leave off white will have the silver showing through, and it would give it a different texture. So I'm experimenting with that right now and just seeing what I can do as far as that white layer goes.
Definitely. And you can really interact with getting different colors of metallics just naturally from the finish of the can, which is really cool.
Exactly.
Now, your illustrations, tend to be quite detailed. Illustrations in general tend to be fairly detailed.
Yeah.
Have you found any sort of questions or complications with the printer and the resolution that they print those cans at, causing you to sort of have to not dumb down, but sort of detail back your work?
Right. Well, a lot of times, so I have a publication background, and so I used to print working at Alt Weekly, and we printed on the crummiest paper. It's paper so cheap that you can give it away for free. Yes. And so from that, you learn so many tricks of how to make things that are printed bad look good. And one of those is just being mindful of those color channels and how many number, your total number in there of your saturation. And obviously, if you have CMYK and you have a little bit of each one, that's just more chances for something to screw up.
Yes.
And so if you can limit those channels to one or two and then some black, you're gonna be able to get away with a lot more. And I'm always really mindful of that. And it's funny because whenever I do color theory, I think of everything as numbers. And so I'm always looking at those percentages and all that. And that way I'm just thinking about that end result. Obviously you would think like, oh, I want to make something as black as can be. I'll just fill all the channels with 100, but it doesn't work that way.
No, I mean, because having been inside of the printer, when you open up a file and you have 400% ink coverage,
right,
you're just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a nightmare. But a lot of designers, especially if they're newer to print design, don't connect the dots between I'm at 400% of my file and I just want black out the back of that press there. Right. And how the 400% affects that.
Right. And it's true. And like going back to talking about the newspaper, if you put 400% black on a piece of newsprint, it's going to be wet and wrinkly. And totally. And even if it did print, it would come off on your hands. And so those are the kind of things that I always think about when doing something. And honestly, to me, it's a lot easier to make a good design look good on a bad print than to if you had me with a slick glossy magazine page, I'd be like, oh crap, I can't hide anything in this because there's gonna be so high quality.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be super smooth and you can't hide anything.
Right.
Perfect. So what do you think makes print so sort of sought after or special to designers? A lot of designers seem to just love print and the idea of print.
Well, I think that designers in general, we all want validated in some way. Mm-hmm. And the best way that you can validate something that you've done is by holding it in your hand and being like, look, Mom, put this on the refrigerator because it's real and I made it. and every single one of us, even web designers, I mean, we all want to hold something in our hand and say that we did that. Yeah. And I think that print design, whether it be a printed page, a packaging, a can, whatever it is, just to be able to hold that thing up and say this is real, it takes up space and has mass. Yeah. It just makes you feel like you did something.
Yeah, rather than, and I can imagine the feeling of gratification being a lot higher than an Instagram ad.
Right, or a sales deck or a presentation of some kind. Those are all very useful, but there's just not too many designers that walk into a boardroom and point at the screen and be like, I did that.
Yeah.
So
you're going to buy the product? I did that deck.
Right. Now, on the flip side of that same thing, annual report or something. I've seen some annual reports where a designer it was like they had a year's worth of pent up energy to let loose on a piece, and an annual report will have 15 different processes on it. Yeah. And it's like, man, how many of these did you make? And they're like, oh, I don't know, 50.
Yeah, that's awesome. Foil stamp throughout 100 pages.
They'll have vellum pages with transparencies and die cuts and embosses in the middle and spot colors and all kinds of stuff just for an annual report for a company that makes airplane parts.
Yeah, for like 50, 60 copies. Totally.
Right. Yeah, and those are awesome. Because then it might as well be in another language. You just look at the print.
Oh, completely. I've been in designers' offices where, if they're packaging designers or they design a lot of shrink sleeves or printed cans, their wall is lined with wine bottles and cans and all kinds of different things that they've designed. Dossier out here in Vancouver was one of them I was in recently. And it's like, just looked awesome. So cool. They have basically a wine rack set up because they do a lot of work in the wine space, and the variety of different labels and the story behind the labels and how they got there is super cool.
And then really that's the difference too, is the difference between I printed a sticker and it went on a different surface versus I printed straight onto a bottle or I printed straight onto a can. It's just different,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I hear you there, man. So inspiration, when you're thinking of designing print, or maybe it's a screen print poster, maybe it's a can, a shrink sleeve, whatever it is, where do you look for sort of inspiration and planning and sketching that? Like, is it different?
It's a little different. I mean, I kind of consider it like a real world Pinterest board. Like, I collect up all the things that I like, and I have them sitting around. I mean, we're talking about cans where we're talking about the printed cans. I have 2 cans sitting here. I have this Liquid Death can where they've knocked out on a gold can to have that, and I've got this Monster can where they've done the same. They've knocked out that silver, and so as soon as we started talking about can process printing, I looked around and I see like 4 or 5 examples. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's how they did that. There's how they did that. And that's what I do. I just collect a lot of stuff. And it's funny because, for instance, I'll be in another state and I'll get a bag of fries. And I'll be like, oh, these fries are in a little wax bag instead of a carton. And it's like, I'm going to keep this. And I fold it up and like put it in my wallet. I'm like, this is important. I need to make sure this gets back. But I have all kinds of stuff. And it's not too bad. I'm not full on hoarder. But things like die cuts. Like, I will disassemble a die cut, and I got a thing the other day. Somebody got me a Nike gift card.
Nice.
And this Nike gift card was in a little shoebox, and when you opened it up, it was kind of sitting on a little tray upright. And I went to unfold this thing, and it was all one piece. It was massive. It folded way out, and then I'm gonna try to get it back together, but it was just this incredible one color print with a die cut that was just so elegant, and just whoever thought of this was from outer space, because it was too cool for most people to even comprehend.
That's so awesome. When you said Nike gift card, I like my head kind of went like, wouldn't it be cool if it was in a shoebox? And then you said it's in a mini shoebox.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
That's all one piece and just all folds out. It was just so cool. I'll have to send you a picture of it for the show notes because it was just awesome. Very, very, very cool. But that's what I do. I have flat files just full of stuff and a lot of times it's just the feel of it. Yeah. And I just want to know what these things feel like because it just makes a huge difference to me, especially it's like a matte versus slick and like soft touch. And just there's so many things that make you feel a certain way about what you're holding. And then you kind of regard it differently.
Yes. No, I completely agree. And that Nike box with the gift card thing, that speaks to, I almost want to say the simplicity of what you can do with minimal print.
Yeah.
You be creative with a die line of something. And you even just throw one color, even throw just the one Nike logo on there in black right on top on a white paper or something, or a craft paper even. And it's jaw dropping because it's simple, yet so complex in its assembly.
Yeah,
and it makes
absolutely.
it an experience.
Absolutely. And a lot of times most people, they don't notice it because they're not nerds like we are.
Yeah.
It does consciously go towards like how they perceive quality or how they perceive what's cool or anything or just function. And all that stuff really does make a difference even to non-designers.
No, 100%. Yeah, they may not know why they're enjoying their interaction with that piece, and they might not dissect it or look further into why they're enjoying that, but they're getting something out of that experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whereas geeks like us, we're going to disassemble that. We're going to take apart the die line. We're going to go, oh man, they did 2 spot colors on this, crazy.
Yeah, and then you're like, was this an in-house job or did somebody else do it? And then you're looking to see who posted it on their Dribbble page and tell them you liked it. Yeah, like we can't just keep everything simple. We have to like know how everything works.
We must know. Absolutely.
I must know.
So, Jason, what was the first print project that you were a part of? The very first one that you produced? And have you been a part of one that didn't turn out as you'd hoped?
So the very first print project, I mean, I've been basically doing print my entire career. I started out in comic books, but I was really just a cog in that wheel, and something was put in front of me, and I made something and sent it back out, and so I was kind of like one of the Keebler elves. But I think that one of them early on that kind of sticks out as kind of a turning point for me. It was probably the mid 2000s, and I went to work for that Alt Weekly I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. And when I went to the interview, they asked me if I used InDesign, and I said, of course I use InDesign. They're like, oh, great, because all we use is InDesign. I'd never opened InDesign before, but I had it. I had it. It came with Creative Suite back then, and so I had it. I just never used it, and so I got the job based on a lie. And I went back to my other job and just opened up InDesign and started figuring it out. The first time you open it, you're like, how do I make text? It won't type. And he's like, you got to make a text box. So I've figured out how to fake it, within a couple weeks. Uh-huh. So I got to this new job, and it was the first time I'd been on a design team, creative director, senior designer, and me, the junior designer. And my title wasn't junior designer, but I was the junior designer.
Yeah.
And they tasked me with this menu guide, and basically salespeople would just bring in these menus, and I would have to rebuild them in InDesign, and we're making this huge guide. And so I just was so happy to have this new job. I was all fired up. I was just busting out work. I was making these menus, and they're like, I'm printing them, and they're like, oh my God, you're doing them so fast. This is great. All your artwork you're finding is great for this stuff. And what they didn't know, and what I didn't realize, is that I was just like copying and pasting stuff here and there, not linking files, not worrying about if it was CMYK or RGB, not paying any attention to the grid or columns or margins or anything. I was just throwing stuff up on a screen and making it look good. And it had to go out to print. And so, I didn't know how to pre-press these files. I didn't know anything about pre-flight or anything like that. And so whenever they took this massive menu guide I'd been working on for a week and a half and opened it to do the pre-flight, there was hundreds and hundreds of errors. I mean, there is overset text, there is files missing, there was RGB, there was just all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was crazy, the mistakes that I had made, and it was very apparent to them at that time that I had no idea what I was doing. They sat down with me and I explained to them that I taught myself InDesign in a week, and they are like, okay, well, let us just tell you a couple things, mostly the difference between CMYK and RGB.
Yeah.
And I talked my way through it. I mean, I ended up being the creative director there, so I figured it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a big one because they were so like, they thought that they had just hired like the perfect employee and I could just do all this stuff. And at a certain point I could, but I could also screw stuff up really bad because they gave me a lot of rope to screw up.
They gave you a lot of rope to hang yourself.
A lot of rope on that one, yeah.
Jeez. I can imagine like the person that was opening that and getting all those errors, they probably just thought they opened a virus or something. Their computer was about to implode.
And the thing is like, I didn't even understand at that point what he was talking about the errors. I'd never even heard of Preflight before, and so, it was just a learning experience. And then it was kind of like, if somebody just threw you in the lake to learn to swim, you just drowned, but then you had a second chance.
Just drowned, but you got a second chance.
Yeah, drowned, but then you got a second chance.
That's awesome, man. Jason, I want to chat a little bit now about some projects that you have been a part of that you're really excited about. Excited to share print related stuff. I hope you got some screen print stuff for me or some cool stuff. But I just want to open that up and I want to hear, I want to sort of unpack and dissect that project with you. How was papers and colors selected? How did the client even come to the conclusion they wanted to print something? Like, give me the whole story, man.
So a lot of times I think that, budget is always, in print, budget is going to be a concern.
Yes.
And a lot of people, they don't come at you with a huge budget, but a lot of times you do have clients that come to you and the code word is usually, I want this to look really nice.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what they say. They don't know what they mean. They just want it to look nice. And to them, a lot of times nice means like the wedding invitation that they got last week that had like a silver lining on the envelope.
Yeah.
And so, you end up doing a lot of converted envelopes. And that's always a funny one because the printer will call you up and be like, you didn't need to convert this. We have these envelopes. You didn't just reinvent the envelope, cousin.
Nobody's ever done this envelope.
Yeah, no one will ever have thought of this flap before. And so I think we all end up doing a lot of converted envelopes. But a lot of times it's just I see a process and then I want to find a place for it. And a lot of times I really love like overprints, especially like a fluorescent overprint.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of people that do that really well. I've got a lot of stuff from a company called Lure in Florida that was obsessed with overprinting stuff for a long time, and I have a lot of their stuff sitting in my files and stuff like an emboss, or a deboss. I just look for places that are those things appeal to me and what client they will fit with. But I think my biggest thing that I like the most is screen printed, especially hand screen printed posters. Mm-hmm. I make them, and I've been doing my own posters since 2006 or 7 probably. Yeah. For a long time, back whenever gig posters were just huge and they're just and people were printing anything and everything, and I'm still doing it. But great story. So I worked at an agency, and we weren't really an agency at that point. We were kind of like a small design shop. Okay. And we screen printed posters, and we had a couple venues that we worked with, a couple promoters, and we had a steady supply. It's just anytime there could be 4 or 5 posters that you could grab, design something, and then go print it. And it was kind of like that. It was sort of like how they do at Hatch, where the designer is also the printer. And we did everything. We burned our own screens. We cleaned our own screens. We mixed our own ink. We did everything. And we did a lot. And that was really where I kind of got the momentum for the amount of screen printing that I wanted to do. And I wanted to do 2 or 3 posters a week besides all the design stuff I was doing. Mm-hmm. Well, we kind of grew as a company and pivoted to more of a full-scale agency model. And I don't know how many agencies you've been at, but most of them are screen print and posters.
Oh,
So no. And so it just kind of went to the wayside, and we tried to hang on to it for a while, but the stuff I was working on was just it needed to have a lot more attention than I couldn't be screen print and posters basically. So we left that to interns for a while, and then it just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron Draplin was coming to talk at our local ad fed, as he does, and he hit me up and he wanted to know if I'd do the poster for it, and I was like, of course I will. What are you gonna say? No, not
Exactly.
today. No, let me get my intern to do it. And so I said I would do it, and it kind of just lit a fire to where I was like, well, I want to really impress him, and I want to print these and make it just a cool project. And so I knew how to do everything, and we'd already been doing it very bootleg way. We didn't have nice equipment or anything. I was like, well, if we got crappy equipment here, I can come up with the same crappy equipment at home. And so that's what I did. I set up my stuff in my garage, and the first thing I did was spec paper.
Nice.
So I went to the French website, because then I was printing on French paper, and I still do a lot, but it was like 100 sheets for $75 or something like that. I was like, no problem. And then shipping is like $55 or something. I was like, holy crap. I was like, well, I better order some more paper. And the shipping just keeps going up. And I was like, on paper. And that is not a new complaint, by the way. Shipping on paper is something that everybody can understand, because it's just crazy. Nobody offers free shipping or anything.
No.
No, they don't. They just don't. It'd be easier for them to move the mill closer. But anyway, I ordered this big pack of like a Pop-Tone orange crush paper, that Draplin orange. And I did this cool illustration. He loved it, and I got to printing. Well, the first mistake I made, and it's so weird, when you're doing stuff just for yourself, your mistakes like echo. Like if you're like that whole menu got screwed up. I just went home and like, oh, learning experience.
Yeah.
But screwing up one little thing for yourself, and you think about it for weeks and you dwell on it, you try to fix it.
Yes.
and learn everything you can from it. It's so weird. And so I had put this little distress over the whole poster. It's just so stupid to even talk about right now. I put a distress over this whole sheet, and I inked up the screen, and I pulled it once, and it was just muddy black garbage over the whole thing. And I was like, what am I thinking? Why would you try to put a little speckle distress over an entire sheet? And that's all it was just like a little speckles here and there. Yeah, I should have just ordered paper that had little speckles in it if that's what I wanted,
Yeah.
But anyhow, I pulled one, and I was like, this is not going to work. I couldn't even get my squeegee to hit it consistently. There's streaks all in it, missed one half. And so I cleaned out the screen. And I took if you're a screen printer, packing tape is one of the best things you can have around, because, man, packing tape will save your life sometimes. And I sat there and just meticulously taped off all the little bits I wanted to keep, and sat there probably for about 3 hours, just cutting off little pieces of packing tape and sticking them over that screen until I got rid of all that little distressy speckles that I didn't want anymore. Mm-hmm. And so printed the poster, took him to the thing, gave him to him. It was so cool to have him put my posters down on his merch table, and he gets done talking, and he's up there signing my poster and selling them to people.
Cool.
And that was a lot of fun. I'd known him before then, but it was just cool to have him in my own town.
Yeah.
And so that was a good experience, and it got me set up to where it was like, well, now I've got the stuff to do posters.
Yes.
So almost immediately I got hit up to do Bubba Sparks poster. I think I talked about the Bubba Sparks one on the last time I was on here. And it was like, okay, well, cool. I need some paper. And I looked, and I had that big old stack of orange paper. And, I didn't use it. I didn't even put a dent in it with the Draplin poster, because it's 100 sheets. I couldn't print 100 posters. And so I got that orange paper, and I was like, well, I want to do this cool design with like a tomato wearing Biv overalls and make it real weird and country. And so I ordered this like bright red, like fire engine red paper.
Yes.
Same story. Shipping's a lot. I ordered like 100 sheets of it. And now I've got this stack of orange paper and a stack of red paper. And so it's like the third design comes, and I look at that orange and that red. I was like, I can't use this orange and red You know, I don't want to be the guy that just keeps putting out orange posters or puts out red posters. And now I'm just like, it looks like a stack of money sitting there getting dust on it, you know?
Yeah.
And so then I learned, I was like, quit ordering exotic colors of paper. Like, just get some white. And so I did. I switched to like Madero Beach by French, and it's got some like texture to it and some character, but it's basically white. And I could print 5 or 6 things, you know. So I learned my lesson about order. I still have a lot of that orange and red paper, though. I use some of the red. I find places for the red, but that orange paper, I think I still have every single sheet that I didn't print for my first job. But yeah, and then through that experience of learning and doing my own screen printing, eventually I outgrew the garage and had to find a place where I could do some more work, and that's how my studio Pink Slips, kind of how I got involved with that. I was looking for something that I could do that in, and so was my friend Jacob, and we started Pink Slips, and so I've been doing that for 3.5 years at Pink Slips, and so I've got thousands of sheets of paper. I've got all the ink. I've got screens. I've got everything you can walk in there and come up with an idea and come out with printed posters. And that's a really cool thing. I've got into magazines with my screen printing. I've got into How and Print Magazine. I've won some awards for it. You know, I did a really cool DJ Kubert poster that got into some design shows. So it's just an interesting thing. And it kind of even led into me doing a lot of art prints that I sell at design conferences. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I learned being autonomous is that I don't necessarily have to have a band like an idea for me to make a poster. I can just, if the idea is good, I'll just make the thing. And if people like it, they'll buy it. So
that's such a cool position to be in.
It is, but I mean, at the same time, it was a long road.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's a deep chapter in the book.
That's awesome. So you're saying you still have that orange paper kicking around in the garage there, eh?
I guarantee I do. I guarantee it's probably still in the shrink wrap, and it's still sitting there. I don't think I've ever printed another poster on orange paper.
Man, Joplin's got to hit you up and order some more of those posters.
Yeah, yeah. Next time he's coming through, I'll throw something on that orange and we'll make it happen.
That's so cool. On that Bubba Sparks project, how did that one come about? Was that just through a connection that you had, or was who was involved in the proofing of the design and that sort of thing?
Gig posters is kind of like, it's sort of like digging for gold, and you find that vein of gold and you keep digging through it and finding more and more. It's sort of like that. Like once you make one for somebody, like a lot of these promoters or managers or even venue owners, like once you do one, they'll just line up 5 or 6. Yeah. And it was kind of like that. So I think that one, Coco Rubio, he's a local guy here. He's sort of like the mayor of the downtown music scene, and a lot of times he had hit you up to do these posters. He had an old venue called Sky City, which was just a really cool spot where we could have art shows. They do concerts and all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so there was just always work to be done for them. And what was cool is that they would frame your posters and hang them up. And so I loved walking in there, and you could just point all around and see all kinds of work that you'd done. And that they changed ownership, and then it kind of became a different business a few years ago. So really missed that place. But working with that, a lot of times it was like you would send the proof off or come up with a sketch. It was a lot easier to come up with a sketch, which the faster the better in that, because these show posters and these people will move on really quick if you don't come up with an idea. And so just kind of sketch something a lot of times just on a Post-it note and just text it back and be like, what about this? Oh, cool, do it. And then you design the thing, send it to them, and then a lot of times they would just clear it with the management. And management, sometimes management is cool and sometimes management is a nightmare, and usually nothing in between. And so they would
one
just
way or the other.
Yeah, so they would either thumbs up it or thumbs down. And if it was a thumbs down, it's kind of like the wind was out of your sails. It's like, well, I don't want to do anything then. Depending on the band. I mean, I know some people do like Dave Matthews Band posters, and they would do 50 proofs if that's what they wanted. But Bubba Sparks gets one. But and then it was cool because what I did is that was whenever I kind of started learning to be a little bit more efficient. And what I was doing is I was playing with transparent colors to where I was like, I'll print a white layer, and then what the green that prints over white is going to be green, but the green that prints over red is going to be almost black.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'm getting 3 colors. I'm actually getting 4 colors because I got the white, the green, that blackish color, and the red of the paper with 2 screens. Mm-hmm. And so that was like a way that I could kind of give myself a challenge for each time I printed something. And that's what I did, is every time that I would print something, I would come up with some kind of technical design challenge that nobody would ever really notice. I mean, they noticed, but they wouldn't know, that's what I was doing. And that's where I got that overprint style where I create a third color. Because a lot of overprinting, it's more about the transparency. But whenever I do it, I'm wanting to cheat and make another color.
Totally. That's such a great thing. Using the color of a paper, using colored paper to create additional elements, even if you're only printing a 2-color job, using the color of the paper to print 3, 4, 5 colors in the job.
Right. Absolutely.
Because the way that interacts with it. Yeah.
And anybody that knows my work knows that I'm a 1 and 2 color designer. I don't go crazy with color. I usually do. I have black and white and then 1 high key color that will just pop.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do. And so to be able to get a third color in there, it's just kind of, it's almost like I found that gold.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So did you get any further feedback from doing those posters? Like, man, those are incredible. You knocked it out of the park, or any sort of ROI? Because the Draplin ones, they were selling those, right?
Right. So the way that it would work with a lot of gig posters, because a lot of these bands, they don't make a lot of money. I mean, we all think rock stars are rich and famous, but touring bands, they don't make a lot of money. And a lot of the money that they make comes from their merch table. And so a lot of times what I would do is I would print the posters. I would take half of them to the venue. They'd put them on the merch table, and then I would keep half of them, or we would negotiate the number. And basically, they would sell their half, and they would keep that money, and then I would sell my half. Which for the first couple of years, I just was accumulating all these posters, like the Draplin poster and the Bubba Sparks poster. I still had a bunch of them, and I didn't have a website or anything. And then these design conferences came along, and it was the first year that they did Crop in Baton Rouge. Yeah. And Crop is a great conference, and Matt Dawson, who runs that, he's like, yeah, come down here. I was going to be one of the speakers, and he's like, bring your merch with you and sell your merch. And I was like, I don't really have merch, in that regard.
Yeah.
And he's like, sure you do. You got stuff, bring it. And I was like, all I have is old gig posters from Sky City in Augusta, Georgia. And he's like, bring them. I was like, who's going to want these? Right. Well, as it happened, I went down there and I had 1 box. My merch total that I took to Baton Rouge was 1 French paper box. It was probably about 3/4 of the way full of posters, laid them out on the table. And I went and I did my talk. And whenever I came back, it was really cool because I came back and I was sitting, my merch was next to Draplin's table, who, is the king of merch.
King of merch.
King of merch. And mine, I had 1 folding table with some prints on it. And so I got back and there was a line of like 40 people. Yeah. And I didn't have change or anything. I didn't think I'd sell anything. And so I went back to that table and just started selling stuff left and right. And I sold out of all those, the Bubba Sparks, the Draplin. I had I think I had like a Clutch and Minus the Bear. I had a bunch of band posters that people just started buying them, and nothing was like geared to the conference or anything.
Yeah.
And so I sold almost all of them. And then the next conference coming up, I think that it might have been the next year. It might have been the following year that whenever it came time to go back to a conference and do a merch table, I didn't have all those old posters anymore. And so I had to make some stuff for the merch table. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I have to fill up this table with something that people are going to want. And that is where the actual physical manifestation of Crunk Friday came from.
No way.
That's exactly where it came from. So we'd been doing Crunk Friday since 2001. But it was 2017 that I had to come up with something to fill a merch table. And so I called my friends that were in on the Crunk Friday thing, and I was like, look, I want to turn this into a brand, and I want to start making printed pieces. Is that cool with y'all? And they were like, yeah, just make some for us. And I was like, yeah, of course. I was like, all the shirts are going to be for you guys. I'm just going to sell them out on the road too. And so that's where that came from. That's where the skull prints and the all the Crunk Friday stuff, all the T-shirts, they all came from a need to fill up a merch table after I'd sold all those screen prints.
No way. The origins of Crunk Friday.
That's exactly what it was. And honestly, if Matt Dawson had talked me into bringing that box of posters, I probably would have never got into the merch game. I'd probably still be sitting on all those posters, wondering what I'm going to do with them. Yeah. And it just worked out that way.
Man, that's crazy. I didn't know that. So before that, 2017, like, oh, damn, I need some merch. Crunk Friday was just like you and the buds.
Exactly. I mean, it was like this. It was from back, in the early 2000s. There wasn't design teams. Like every big company had a designer, and they just kind of put you in the back room with Milton, and you're just back there by the microwave in a cubicle, and it's like, just stay back here. Don't let anybody see you. And that was just kind of how our existence was, because design wasn't sexy. You had to go work where somebody could afford the computer, and that's where you were stuck. And so, yeah, we all would talk on like this launch cast that Yahoo had where you could play videos for each other. And there's a whole bunch of us that just stuck in different office jobs. And we would just, on Fridays, we'd all kind of play music for each other. And that was Crunk Friday. That was all it was. It was just like, the last day of work, get excited about it so we can all go out for the weekend.
That's amazing. Yeah. I did not know that that's how Crunk Friday came to be.
Yeah. Now, I've had to rearrange my office to have a shipping department, because now I've got my website, and I ship out Crunk Friday shirts almost every single day.
So you are the CEO, the head shipper, the designer, the janitor.
Yes, that's right. The janitor, the comptroller, I'm everything. The only thing I'm not, I don't print shirts. So I know so many really good apparel printers that I have no desire to print my own shirts. I know a lot of people are like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you were doing that? I was like, nah. If I screw up a sheet of paper, I can call it art. If a T-shirt's not perfect, nobody wants it.
Yeah.
So that's why I see it. A shirt costs a lot more than a sheet of paper.
Sure does, man. Well, when you count in shipping.
Yeah, when you count in shipping, most of your cost is shipping on a sheet of paper.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. I did not know the origins of that. So
that's it.
Jason, I want to ask you now, what advice would you give a designer who is new to print or wanting to get started with print design? Where should they start? What should they learn first?
Honestly, the first thing they should do is go see how this stuff is made. Mm-hmm. I love going into the print shop. My friend Christian lets me come in. He's just like, come in the side door, come in the employee entrance if you ever want anything. And so I love going in there, and there's just machines running. There's people everywhere doing stuff. And it's like, go in there and find out what those people are doing. Find out the names of those machines. Find out how they work. Well, because like it goes back to like the converted envelope. We sit here, look at a screen, and we think that we're inventing everything. And then all of us, you take 10 designers that are sitting by themselves. They all think they're inventing something, and then all 10 of them send it to the same printer. He sees everything. And so that print manager is like the all-seeing eye of design. He sees the good, he sees the bad, he sees the ugly, and these people know what looks good. They know what works well together. And I've had where like the print guy called me up and he's like, "Hey, what if you did this whole thing vertical instead of landscape?" And at first I'm just like, "Man, who are you to tell me what to do? You're not a designer." And then I switched around, look at it, I'm like, man, that looks pretty good. And so a lot of times, like, they're doing the same thing. They're coming up with ideas. Like, they want to try stuff. And if you can connect with them, it's just, man, you can form like Voltron and make some cool stuff. But you have to go in there and see how that stuff gets made. You have to see the people that got ink all over their fingers. And you have to understand that it's not like hitting print on your laser printer. Nah. You're not just paying somebody to run to hit go on a machine, these people that make all this cool stuff that we collect, they're more responsible for it than we are. Mm-hmm. All we're doing is making choices. They're making it possible.
Yeah.
And I say, get up, go down there, and just go be nosy. Go bug them. They don't care. They'll tell you all about it. They love talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of these places are running 24 hours a day. They love to talk to people that are excited about what they do. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, look at the boxes. That's why, that's how I found out about French papers. Like walking through a place and I saw reams, like just reams of French, and it had that Charles Anderson design on it. And I'm like, whoa, what is that? And I walked over and looked at the packaging the paper was in. And I was like, can I have this? And they're like, you want the wrapper off the paper? I was like, yeah, please. And so in the late 90s, I had a ton of just scraps of packaging from Charles Anderson stuff, and eventually figured out the French and got like my first little sample books.
That's so cool. And that, that's so true. Go in there and see how it's made, because if you can't
smell it.
Yeah.
Like the smell of a print shop and the noise. It's another, it goes back to that thing being real.
Yeah. How are things made? How are things created? Because understanding the process gives you a better understanding of how to make your design take advantage of that process. Exactly.
And what's really cool is I'll take a stack of prints that I've just done over there, and they'll cut them down for me. And they're as fascinated with my process as I am with theirs. And I'll have a one color screen print, and they'll be like, so how did you do this? And I'll explain it to them. And they're like, we just want to come and see how you're doing this, because we can't figure out how you're doing this in a garage.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's easy. It's a really good way to make stuff real, because we spend so much time looking at pixels.
Yeah.
And you just got to get out in the world and see how stuff is really made.
Oh, 100%. So true. And I find that, when I get a file in or something, when I was working in print, I would say to the designer, hey, do you want to come for a press check for this? Like, what do you mean? What's a press check?
Right.
Man, that's your opportunity to come into my house to see how this is all made and to give your stamp of approval before we run, all 20,000 of these things.
Right.
And sometimes that's their first time inside a printer.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of times, like press check is a great time. It's exactly right. And when you go in there and you're looking at that big sheet, and there's all that stuff on the side, those little color bars and little crosshairs and stuff, ask them what that is. Don't just pretend like you know what that stuff is. Ask them. Be like, what is that little thing right there? And they'll be like, oh, that's how we know that it's in or out of registration. That's how, that's how we know what colors are being printed. That's how we know that's the file name. Ask them that stuff. Learn. Yeah. Don't be embarrassed. I didn't know what a folio was. I was at the newspaper. They kept talking about the folio. And I was like, what in the hell is the folio? And of course, I didn't think just to Google it, but it was just like, it took me like 3 weeks to figure out what the folio was, And so, ask questions.
Yeah. I've had that same conversation about booklets. Like, you do your printed signatures of your multi-page booklets, and they're folded down to like the correct page order. But when you're looking at it as a flat sheet, you got page 20 down here, you got 21 way up over here. You got to
flip it over.
You're like, what? Yeah. This doesn't make any sense. How do these line up? And then you show them it folds like this, like this, like this, like this. Trim these off, and there you go. It's in page order.
And then there's sometimes, the printer will call you and he'll be like, hey, you got so many pages, it's going to creep and it's going to kind of belly out. You need to trim that edge. Just stuff like that. The computer is not going to tell you that.
No.
Computer's not going to tell you if you make a 60-page booklet that it's going to have a weird angle, whenever the spine starts smooshing in on itself, and that you have to trim those things for it to look good at all.
Yeah, definitely. No, I completely agree with that.
So yeah, the best advice I could give to any designer is get to know the person that is doing your printing.
Yes.
And form a good relationship with them. I take my guy steaks and stuff all the time. Anytime that he will let me thank him in any kind of way, I do. And a lot of times he won't let me, but if I can grill him a steak, I do.
I love that. Take him a steak.
I will. And he's such a cool guy that like he'll trim down all my posters on the day of I'll be ready to go to a conference, and he will trim down all my stuff. He'll just drop everything and trim all this stuff down, and then I'll like get him a steak, and then he'll insist on having me over for dinner to pay me back. And I was like, I'm trying to get even with you, and you keep throwing it back in. You won't let me get
working, brother.
It's like, it's just because to him it's just his job. It's how he treats everybody.
Yeah.
But I just, it's a lot different to have that kind of relationship with your printer than it is to just send something off to an online printer, get it in the mail, you open it up, and it's like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
They did the job.
Yeah, totally agree.
So,
well, Jason, I have for the Quickie podcast, I have this question called the Ask It Forward question.
Yes.
That's where my guest can ask a question of the next guest, and it sort of keeps this thing going. I wanted to try something a little different with this print design podcast here. So I have an Ask the Audience question. Now, this is where you get the chance to ask a question of the audience, and we take the engagement over to Instagram, and we, in the post about this show, and about this question, that's where we'll have the question answers and people answering, and building this little community around each episode. So, as the inaugural interviewee, what is your Ask the Audience question, Jason?
First of all, I am the first guest on this podcast.
You are the first. I got 3 more right after you here, but you're the
first. You
did
not. You should have told. I would have put on a cleaner shirt. I mean that.
No, I wanted you au naturel.
Well, thank you for having me as the inaugural guest. First of all, that I really do appreciate that. So my question for the audience, going back to what I was saying about the VHS tapes, I can vividly remember what covers I looked at, and I looked forward to going back to the video store to look at those. I know not everybody listening to your podcast was probably even alive when they had video stores, so I'll kind of amend the question. But what was the first cover? It could be album cover, CD cover, VHS, DVD, magazine cover, book cover. What cover do you just remember looking at and being like, man, that's cool? And really seeing it. A buddy of mine, Leonard, he always talks about how he knew he wanted to be a graphic designer when his sister got him Amy Grant tape, and it had 4 different covers, and so I think that a lot of us can trace back to stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I want to know what the one was. What was the one thing that you saw that was different? Because I mean, I remember getting that Metallica Black album CD, and it's like printed black on black. And I remember thinking that they screwed it up. I was like, I opened it up. I was like, man, this is like a misprint. And I didn't know anything about printing. I was like 10 years old. I was like, this is like a misprint I got here. And so stuff like that. But that's what I want to know. I want to know what one kind of sticks with them.
Okay, do you want to hear my answers?
Yeah, absolutely.
I got two albums that stand out to me. The first one was my first ever CD purchase. First ever. It was the Presidents of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And I want to get the album right here. So I'm just going to look this up real quick here.
Is that the one with the frogs on the tree? Or something? It's like a little puppet show thing. It's weird.
It was. Let me get the images here. Nope, it was. I think it was self-titled. It was the golden frog playing the saxophone and the like the golden statues. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it was weird. It was like a little maquette thing. There's like a frog. I remember there being a frog.
Yeah,
like
frog front and center, like playing an instrument.
Yeah.
And then the second one was Big Willie style, Will Smith.
Nice.
Do you remember that one? Yeah. Dude, I had this little CD player, and I would put the CD in, and I would just be rapping along.
Yeah.
I just love Big Willie style, man.
Well, I would be lying. As I was emerging in my career, that's whenever all the like No Limit albums came out with the lenticular CD covers.
Oh yeah.
And like every month, there would be new ones. And I don't care what anybody says. That stuff changed a lot for a lot of people. That was the first like bling stuff. That was the first like anything like that. And regardless how dated it was, it was perfect for that time.
That's so awesome. I love that, reminiscing on the old albums that like just got us jazzed up.
Absolutely. Well, I've actually lately I'm trying to under this social distancing stuff that we're doing, I've been trying to up my skills and do some more painterly type stuff because I want to be able to offer just more to my clients, so if there is a beer packaging that wants something that's photorealistic, I'll be able to show something that I've done like that.
Yeah.
And the way I've been doing that is by just doing album covers, kind of like their figure drawings. And so it works really well because the albums are big. I can kind of set it in front of me, and then with the iPad I can look up and look down. So I'm not doing a photo reference. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it where I'm actually looking at the physical thing and then drawing it the best that I can. And I'm trying to get really good at that. But album covers, I found it are a really good way to do that because they're all really well thought out. They're difficult. And now I'm saying that, I think that I've got one that I can do is that the Cars, whichever Cars album had all the airbrush stuff on it, and like the airbrush bomber girls looking stuff, like that would be a really hard one to draw from just looking at it. So, it's just stuff like that. Like, I think album covers are they're very influential.
Definitely. Man, that's so awesome. I love that, Jason. That is the end of the Print Design Podcast. Just want to take a second here to thank you so much for being on the show here. Thank you for sharing, your passion for print and the stories and experiences that you've had with it, both wins and fails. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to the print version of this podcast coming out.
Excellent. Challenge accepted.